Please ask host to give your permission to record.
I think I've got it rolling now.
Okay.
So I'm going to share back and make you the host again. And I think we're good. Have at it. Go for it.
All right. Are we still seeing the same smart contracts for network?
Yep.
All right. So yeah, so I got introduced to you guys through Antelope Water Management, Dustin Brownlow, and then Zach. So we just had a quick conversation and thought that maybe there's something interesting with what we're doing that might resonate with your group. So this is more of a kind of a broad overview of DataGumbo and who we are and kind of what we do. And I've got some interesting ideas and some things that we've worked on recently to share. So really just trying to get everybody to think a little bit and see, where, our technology might work to make, what everybody's doing a little bit, better, faster, stronger, and kind of maybe transition some people into the digital world. So with that, our product is called GumboNet. So it's a massively interconnected blockchain network of customers, suppliers, and vendors, and it's all based on digital code. So we use a blockchain base with, and this isn't Bitcoin or any kind of cryptocurrency. We take the contractual portions of a contract and we digitize those into code. So the blockchain allows us to do that. But and this is what you get when you get sort of a network effect. So you get all the parties operating in an agreement, almost like a LinkedIn type network where you have digital contracts in the background, and it's using data that's consumed from the field to either project KPIs or do performance contract or billing. You can invite different people on there. It's a network instead of having just some kind of electronic ledger that's just dedicated to your company. So we always kind of say that you don't want to be the only one on the island with a fax machine. So you want that kind of network effect, but we're bringing people into the digital age, and that massively interconnected series of contracts shows basically what you're seeing here today. GumboNet is, again, it's taking IoT data from the field and creating smart contracts. So that's digital code. And so with that digital code, you can do a number of different things. You can create lease operating expenses or expenses. So as the digital data is consumed in real time, we take out everything in between the time the data comes in and the time it's projected in the field. Sometimes that goes to ERP systems. Sometimes that's ESG information and KPIs, and sometimes that's related to financial accounting practices. So for normal practices are very paper intensive. It has other software as a series, software systems as a service. Now we don't have to have that anymore. And the blockchain ledger, allows us to do it, allows us to consume a lot of different information in real time. And we take that digital code and we make the data compliant to the contract. And then whatever we need to do with that, whether we're creating certificates or we're creating accrued invoices for ERP systems, whatever, we're able to do that now. And so my mind was going from, water and our initial conversations was being able to certify water quality. So that's something that's been kind of on my mind, being, my background is we're always having problems like commingling different water streams and then being able to have operators, buy them back, or what is the actual, water quality that we need to discharge into, the Pecos or other rivers and streams. So being able to, take actual sensor data that's measuring that and being able to see, water quality and have that water quality either turn into a certificate or reject it, right? So from a produced water standpoint, from a desalination standpoint, initially when we were talking together, that was kind of where, my head was at. It was that could we take permit information? If somebody is over their pressure reading, could we get that in real time to red flag so people aren't looking for a needle in the haystack? We're actually pointing to the needles. So, again, we're taking kind of these antiquated manual processes to something that's more automated. So, just think about going to a gas station and getting an invoice 30 days later. We don't do that anymore. In industry and oil and gas, I don't think it'll surprise everybody here is that it still sort of works like that. And then just kind of, I wanted to show just a little bit of the basics of the blockchain. Each block has a unique fingerprint, and it's a cryptographic code between blocks. So it's extremely secure. So when people say you can't hack a blockchain, usually they're hacking into the information that the blockchain points to. In our blockchain, the information is inside the block. So that's what makes us a bit unique. So you have a data lake of information from your contracts. And, if we look at it from a produced water standpoint, usually it's the data between meters, it's a third-party trucking company, and then it's the contractual data. So you have, that meter is going to run, it's going to have a price per barrel, it's going to have mins and maxes and so forth. And so when that meter is running, we capture that information, and then whenever that water lands at the saltwater disposal well, when the two pieces of data match up, that piece of data goes through to an ERP system. But if there's a variance level and it doesn't meet the variance, or for some reason, water has left and it hasn't been received in the quantities that it left with, that'll red flag it in the system. So we've been able to, as you'll see in some of the use cases I'll show, we've been able to save people a lot of money in that. And so that data lake turns into the digital code, which is a smart contract. And then as that information accrues, it'll accrue into the block. Each block, if there's anything that changes, it'll create another block in the chain, and it's got this cryptographic fingerprint that's between each block. We've been able to interface with SAP, Oracle, other dashboards and systems that people are using. So that's something that we do. And again, there's no tokens or cryptocurrencies that are involved in us. I mean, we use the blockchain technology just to write the smart code to create these digital contracts. And again, whether it's a payment or whether it's a KPI or whatnot, that code will project that information to where it needs to go.
So Fred,
yep.
You probably need to explain a little bit about blockchain,
okay.
Because you've got a couple really cool tech, by the way, but you've got this, like the fact that you're using blockchain is just a way to make all this stuff secure, right? You could do this without blockchain in a client server environment or something like that. Am I getting right?
I mean, you can do anything you
right.
you want
okay,
to.
But but I guess the point here, Fred, is that a lot of us may not be familiar with this whole concept of automatic payments, that kind of stuff. And so what it seems to me you're bringing to the table here is all that functionality plus unbelievably tight security. And so, the idea with blockchain is that everybody has some piece or an exact copy of the data, and then that way there's no chance for fraud. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
The second part of that is right now there's always a disconnect between this great data that people have and actually getting it to where it needs to go. And so that's usually a manual push. So the manual push usually comes from accounting. What we do is we're closing that gap. And right now you can use, they say that there's third-party invoicing systems. There's third-party systems that'll connect into the ERP systems, but there's nothing right now that actually takes data consumed from the field and actually enforces that onto a ledger directly to where it needs to go. There's always a manual push, whether it's a person or a system. And so because of the way that the blockchain works, it allows that digital code to be written, and that digital code allows the data in the field to happen in real time. So once that data happens, the CEO or the person in charge gets to see it at the same exact time, and all the different parties are seeing the same ledger. So if you look at this example right here, you've got the oil companies and saltwater disposal companies, and then your service providers. They'll have all their source data in one spot. So those will usually be meters with sensors on it. And so that data will be collected in real time, and we know what the contract is. So we'll have digitized the contract. So once that water leaves, we know the well, we know the truck, we know how much, and now the contract is starting to enable itself. So now once it's accruing, if there's a matrix where it has this SWD at this price with this truck and this mileage, we're capturing that right at that time. And so that smart contract is now creating that accrual that'll turn into the block. So that's one piece of it. On the flip side, where you see the right side, so you've got the blue, which is happening, and then you have everybody that's operating on the right side, they're seeing the same thing in real time. So instead of 3 different companies using 3 different data points, they're now looking at, they're using those data points, but now they're actually looking at the same thing in real time. So the blockchain ledger is allowing that to happen. And so, you know, the oil companies may only see the service provider because that's who they're contracted to, but the service provider, they may see the oil company, the SWD. So it's contractual. So you don't see, not everybody's up there for everybody to see their business. You only see who you're contracted with. So so it's a little bit private between those companies, but that ledger, whatever's happening on that ledger is now visible for all the parties to see in real time. So normally that's a disconnect. And so that's the biggest thing that that blockchain allows, is the digital code with that visibility between parties. And so in our and one of our first projects was we had a big oil company and we had an SWD company that was actually managing all the trucking in between. The oil company just didn't have any visibility into what was leaving their location, and so they were kind of accepting what was being invoiced back to them. And so what we were able to do was go in there, set the blockchain ledger, and be able to smart code all the water that was leaving their location. And what they found was almost a 30% savings. And they found out that they had more, they had better data, because now what we're doing is we're laying this blockchain ledger and you have trust between the parties and you actually have transactional certainty. So for the first time, geologists were like, wow, I actually know how much water is actually coming off these wells. And the oil company was happy because they knew exactly what their invoice was going to look like, and it was happening in real time between the parties, instead of having this really horrible kind of reconciliation process that was hardly auditable. Every truck was just magically 120 barrels every time. Well, come to find out it wasn't. And there are some ghost tickets and some other funny things that we all know happen out there, but we were able to catch all of this. And it just happened. The minute you turned it on, boom, red flags came out and everybody started to sort out their business. And then once everything came back down, they announced at a Blockchain for Energy conference that they had saved 31% cost. And it was, I think it was $4 million on like $13 million spend or something like that. So it definitely put us to the test, and it worked, but it really trues everything up. You create the transactional certainty between the data points. Everybody's on a shared electronic ledger. And now you can trust the data that's coming back and forth because it's in one place happening in real time. So John, does that help out a bit?
Yeah, I guess, you know, what I'm trying to do is make it an I always try to do this with software. You know, how would you do it in real or fantasy life? And, you know, maybe what you'd do is you'd have a person at the saltwater disposal well with a telephone talking to accounting, and he's measuring the water as it comes off. And on the same line is the supervisor for the well, the trucking company, and they're all listening to the guy say, okay, that's 122 barrels. And everybody agree? We all agree. Okay, that's what we're going to write it down in our mutual ledger. And then when it comes time for billing, that's what we're going to pay. Is that kind of an analogy for what's going on here?
That's one of many ways that they do it. Some people estimate on the production coming off and they say, okay, this is our water cut. This must be it. And then on the saltwater disposal side, they'll say, well, look, we had, you know, for your company, we had, you know, 25 trucks come today. So 25 trucks times 120 barrels. And of course it doesn't match up, right? So that is always kind of where the headbutts kind of happen, where you start to say, okay, well, my invoice is lower, yours is higher. So where do we fit? So we're, you know, doing what we're doing with that smart code, it straightens all of that out, and it straightened them out to the tune of something like $4 million.
So again, the idea is that you have like this trusted third party that's almost a referee, but in this case, it's software.
Yeah. So, and
right?
that's exactly what we are. We're the neutral party. And you know, and if the oil company had their own blockchain and they were doing this, it would kind of be like the home team with the referee. Like you can't be the referee in the home team sort of thing. And again, they wouldn't be able to connect with the outside world because they would just be siloed. But yeah, that's you got it. That's exactly what we're providing.
So one example with water quality might be the periodic reports that come off of a drinking water treatment plant. I reviewed one today, and it was, handwritten notes from the person that took the samples, and then a report from the lab, and all that's put together in a PDF and stuck on a website. But how do I know that's actually the right version, that somebody didn't put the wrong version up, or maybe they deliberately tried to mislead me, or the lab guy tried to mislead me? And I think that's what you're saying with this blockchain approach, is that everybody has access to the same exact information at the same time. So you can't get away with fraud. I mean, that's the idea behind using blockchain for Bitcoin, right? Everybody, and if somebody doesn't agree, then we know there's an outlier and you have to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we look at this from an ESG standpoint, and this is something that we put up there, is we're able to take those KPIs like what you just said. So as long as we have, I'm going to let people enter here while I'm doing this. As long as we can have, we good? So yeah, as long as we have the sensor data and we're measuring that, you can project that into a certificate. So if you have certain KPIs that have to be measured, and it has to be whatever the oil and water is, whether it's, iron, whatever it is, if it meets those KPIs, we can project that. And then that would be published. So what we have is we have a private one, but we also have the ability to take like the certificate and make it public. So, and these would just roll up in real time, however they would want them seen. So you could just have a place on the website that has a link, click on that link, and as these certificates happen, they'll be there in real time. And so that is data that you can trust. And so what we would do is, take the manual handwritten processes out. But again, the data points need to be there. And I think that's the thing. But you can write your KPIs for your ESG or your water quality or what have you. We do this with drilling rigs right now, where they have slip times, they have move times, they have curve times. And so we have the data, and we write all those KPIs and we connect into their dashboard so we can see, has a rig been budget to actual financially? Is it ahead of the curve? Is, from a QHSC and downtime standpoint, we can measure off the IEDC report, if their downtime exceeds what their KPI percentage is. So we do the same thing for ESG requirements as well. And, I really think that certifying water quality, considering, what we had mentioned before was that commingling of the produced water streams, and being able to say, okay, this is a KPI that can possibly be used for, whether or not they're going to frack with it, or if there's, the ability to take produced water, treat it for, non-food crops. I think EWS did that Anadarko cotton crop a while back, and it seemed to be, somewhat successful. So, but we can do that now. And I think, from an offtake standpoint, if somebody had, a paper or a piece of, or a document that was, certified, it makes them a lot happier to take that water and utilize it. And then you can go all the way back to, insurance, that we work with a number of different insurance companies, and, having these blockchain ledgers and smart contracts actually has the ability to help reduce premiums. So there's this kind of, big effect of, different areas where, blockchain helps out.
This is Charlie Peter with a question. One of the things that eventually utilities might be implementing is something called direct potable reuse. To Mike Hightower, that's toilet to tap. But at any rate, one of the worries about that is the water has to be, absolute consistent quality. And when it gets off spec, it needs to be diverted. So I guess an analogy to this, to what I just described is in this system of GumboNet, what happens when, one of the commodities being monitored is off spec? It's not consistent with the KPIs that have been negotiated in a smart contract. What happens to the goodie or the commodity that's off spec and can't take the normal path of action, and what is there in place to monitor that? For
So,
example, water it's got too much brine.
yeah. So when it meets the conditions, those transactions will go through and they'll be populating right in front of you in real time. In the case that it doesn't, it'll red flag. So instead of, you'll be able to see it right then and there. So obviously, if it didn't do that, then somebody would have to come tell you that, hey, we, tested this, and it doesn't meet spec. Well, how long has it been going like that? An hour, 2 hours, a day? You don't know. The minute that it doesn't hit spec, you'll know it right then and there. So you can divert it, deal with it. Maybe there's some chemical treatment or whatnot that can be injected, right then and there, but or you can just bleed it out however you want. But the system is set up to where it'll red flag at the exact moment that the KPIs are not met, so you can take action.
Okay, thank you.
And it'll also keep a track record of that, right, too. So you can always go back and see, were we consistent? Are we having this, are we having this problem? And, that can turn into a KPI report. But that, if we were looking at certifying a water quality, that water would not meet the spec, would be rejected, would be red flagged in the system. And then you would have off to the side, like all the rejections. So you'd be able to see that.
Hey, Fred, this is Jerry. I got a quick question for you. I'm wondering if there's a mechanism by which, say there's a requirement to share produced water volume data with the government for reporting. Do you guys link into something like that? Does that have to be by mutual agreement of all the buyers and suppliers and everybody else? How might that work?
So we're going to do what we're told, but we can interface with anything. So if there is a government requirement to report, we can create that for the company, and we can also write the API and interface with whatever the governmental entity is using, and post those, whether it's a certificate or whether it's a compliance report. And that's part of this GumboNet ESG that you're seeing in front of you right now. And then it also ties into the certification program that we're putting out.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, ESG is almost #1 right now. I mean, we say it's #1, but people have to make money too. But yeah, there's a huge push on the ESG front.
Nice.
This seemed to be a slick way to monitor water diversions or groundwater diversions in real time, or maybe, water diversions in real time, whether it's through an irrigation district head gate or something at a well, at the wellhead for a groundwater well. If we really wanted to start getting a handle on water diversions. Too bad John D'Antonio's not on this call. He's the state engineer for New Mexico, and that would be an item of data of keen interest to him.
So if we take that, like, I like the fact of being able to take the water permits and being able to see if somebody's, over or under their allotment, and we saw that kind of south of Fort Stockton for a while, where, there was people wanted these huge permit allocations for their water, and then when they wouldn't use it, they wanted to keep it, right? So what do? They just flood irrigate for no reason, all right? That's kind of wasteful. And so, but you would be able to see those spikes, and you'd be able to see if people were over and under. And if they had the meter and the sensor data that they could push back in, the water districts and so forth could capture that. They could see just about everything they needed to see. So there wouldn't be a need to put in a lot of those monthly reports anymore. And you could look at the red flags versus having to go out and kind of audit everybody. And I think this right here shows it just a little bit, capturing a fuel tank level with the sensor and the meter. And then, and this is set up from the well site to the disposal well. And so you can capture truck and ticket information, generate the pre-approved payments, or you generate the KPIs based on, what you're doing. And then if it's a pricing model, it guarantees the pricing. Again, this is creating trust between all the parties. So you may have 5 different SWDs, you may have 3 or 4 different operators, you may have, a couple of different SWDs, but they're all working on, one blockchain ledger with smart contracts, and everybody gets a complete record of whatever's been moved, dropped off, come off the site. The minute something's red flag, both parties get to see it. It could be a meter that needs to be calibrated, could be a slug in the line, whatever the case may be. They can figure out the dispute right then and there, and then what that does, it just creates another block into the chain. But I think one of the most important things is that the data, we got to have the data, but once the data is there, we can make the connection between enabling the enforcement of the contract onto the blockchain and be able to get it to, again, wherever it needs to go, whether it needs to be a compliancy report, a dashboard for KPIs, or if it's connected to payment. This is, I wanted to just bring some use cases out that we've done. This was the big water haulage one that we did. And this was on that I think it was a little over $13 million spend, and we were able to save them a little over $4 million with, creating the blockchain ledger for water haulage for water disposal. And the main thing was that we were confirming that ticket data with live data that's consumed from the field. So when the data was consumed right off the well site to the SWD, and it matched within the variance, so that payment was pre-approved and it was going through the ERP system. And so, like I said earlier, one of the main savings here was kind of the value leakage coming from, well, we call it value leakage, but I mean it was errors coming from the trucks being billed out as full when they went to the SWD site. And so what we found out is that they weren't, sometimes they were less than half full. And so we were able to capture that and then be able to minimize the trucks that were needed for the water that was coming off the site and being disposed of. That was a huge savings. But we integrated directly with the SAP, generating the pre-reconciled invoices. So it was less invoice touches overall. They had a third-party electronic invoicing system that we were able to take out. Much more auditable and secure. The back-end office reconciliations basically almost went away. Everything was pre-approved. And we had over a 90% matching and approval of the tickets that were coming through on the first 5 well pads. And then we kind of look at this is kind of a bigger deal, but it was the same idea. There was a blockchain ledger that was set up for the well. And it was a 520 page contract. I think we were bringing in about 30 or so data points. It included the POB, all the drilling equipment that was coming in, and the rentals, and the mud, and the cuttings, and the fluids. And then they were looking at, about 190 days processing. We were able to give complete transparency between all the parties that were working on it, basically reduced any audits that they had. Everything, again, like I said, everything was pre-approved. The transparency was incredible. The operators they never really knew exactly what they were being invoiced for. So it was always my team versus your team. They were looking at their data versus the other company's data. So, for the first time, they were seeing everything in real time, and they were looking at about 40% in disputes overall. And so they minimized that to less than 10%. So that was, I think that was a little over a $50 million spend, and you can see the savings that were generated from the GumboNet.
So what was their cost for implementing the Gumbo Net? Or how do you guys, do you have monthly subscription after you get them set up? How does your business model work?
Yeah. Yeah. So we're a subscription service.
Do you take a percentage of their savings?
That's exactly, yeah. So we'll agree on it and then we'll set that up and that's a subscription. Yeah.
That's cool.
You know it. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's a great model to be honest with you. You know, it's everybody's got a little skin in the game. And then once it's set up on the ledger, we're just we're a party to the ledger like everybody else. And so if it doesn't meet those KPIs and requirements, you know, the payment doesn't happen. So, but yeah, that's our commercial model in a nutshell. A lot of people don't know this, but there is a blockchain consortium set up for oil and gas. They've upgraded it quite a bit, but just about every major oil and gas company is involved, and the service company end. I don't know lately if they've been able to bring themselves on, but I know that there was talk about bringing in kind of a number of bigger service companies when you look at services on the well, all the way to like your big lease operating expenses. Yeah, you can look them up, Oil and Gas Blockchain Consortium. And this is just kind of our Gumbo Net wall. We've got two large financial backers now, Saudi Aramco and Equinor. And so as they start to put more of their business on, we're able to take them from almost seismic to production and be able to create these Gumbo Net walls that are all backed by blockchain with data that's feeding into them from the field. And we can look at, you know, the performance information and technical information and assets to the financials. So yeah, just kind of a quick and easy overview of who we are and what we do and a few of our accomplishments. Then I think I can give this back to you guys.
Yeah, I already grabbed the host back, so I think that's good.
There we go.
Thank you very much. That was really cool.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out how you translate this model to a low budget water data system for the state of New Mexico, where we only have $100,000 for the whole year to do all sorts of things. So,
well, on some associations, and we've been able to be a revenue generator for them. So we don't look at ourselves as a cost. And so one of the major kind of oil field associations that we're working on right now is they need to standardize their contractual process, and they really need to take it digital. Everybody that's on the service side has the digital data points, but everybody does it pretty inconsistently. So there's really, that inconsistency can't necessarily be helped because everybody's different. So what we've been able to do is work with them to make their contractual database digitized based on trigger points on codes, and then run it through their portal. And so the subscription service actually pays them. So they're not paying us to do that. The revenue stream is actually comes from the participants that are going through it. They're getting a saving. So it's very much a win-win for everybody. So we wouldn't be going into, you know, working with associations as, you know, we're gonna need you guys to write some big fat check, you know, up front. We think that you guys being the thought leaders for the industry and kind of guiding the industry, we're bringing this technology out there and then really funneling it to a consistent place, and then helping people have their own, you know, digital leads. And then, you know, we've been able to, like I said, to turn that into a revenue generator.
I like the aspect that the people who generate the data and the people who are utilizing the data get to agree readily on that the data is okay, because you have people who are pumping water, for example, and the state might be wanting to monitor that pumping, and nobody wants to feel like they're not getting the right amount. The people who are pumping want to get credit for every bit that they've pumped and diverted, and then the state wants to be sure that they understand exactly what's been pumped out of the ground and have a good view of it. And so that I like that collaborative aspect of the whole thing.
Yeah, and again, once you set the KPI and you get the data points, we'll be able to grab that data and project it with certainty. So there'll be trust in the data. There'll be trust between the parties with less work.
Cool.
But doesn't this depend on integrity of the data gathering and data entry systems? And so how do you ensure that?
So absolutely correct, Keith. And so I guess you could say if it's garbage in, it's going to be garbage out, right? So you don't want it. Yeah. So that's one of the key components is the data and the data quality. So it doesn't take, huge CapEx to be able to get, the data integrity regular. If we're looking at, regular water wells, I mean, just the regular meters and sensors and SCADA systems work just fine. So there's nothing too rocket science on it. If they don't have a data source, that would, then you're only going to be automating, that if they're agreeing that data, however it comes in, is what they want to utilize, then it's only going to be as good as that data point. The better data, obviously, the better smart contracts and certainty you're going to get. So, but you're right. If if they don't have quality data coming in, they're only going to use a great process to automate it and then get sort of good output. But I would think most people these days are investing into more quality, data points. And I mean, even some of them, but I'm not surprised because I've even talked to some of the majors and we were putting together some of their water projects, and they didn't have any meters, they didn't have any tank sensors, they didn't have anything, so we've been able to use the tank sensors and everything, but I mean, to the point where, it's like, you guys need to put something out there if you want to capture data and you want to digitize this process. And if you look at their PwC audits, I mean, it's all over the place. If you look at the financials, there's bad debt. And a lot of it comes from, water management. It's like 40% sometimes of their well costs, So, but yeah, well, having good data is key.
Hey, Fred, this is Zach. On that point, do you think that there's a need, or do you think that improving sensor technology, especially kind of real-time sensors, would help push DataGumbo along a little bit further?
I think so. The fact that anybody has any halfway decent data source out there is really good enough for us. I mean, I think, having the better sensors and some of the better data points, it's good for us, but I think it's also good for the company. But mainly, we're not really having to work with NASA rocket science. I mean, just like I said, regular meters with a sensor and the SCADA systems that they're using right now, that they're just fine for what we're accomplishing.
Any other questions for our guest?
So I have a question, Charlie.
Yeah.
So Fred, applications so far, and where do you, can you give us kind of an overview and where you think your applications are going to go in the next 5 years? Are you primarily focused on oil and gas? Are you looking at other types of water systems, things like that? Just, can you give me a kind of overview?
So we're scaling at such a rapid pace that I've actually been taken out of oil and gas, and I'm now into new markets and ventures. So our corporate development program is going more into waste management, disposal. We're doing more midstream. Water is huge for me from a municipality standpoint, to meters and ESG. We're looking at agriculture. We're looking at renewables. So the next 5 years, we're gonna have grown substantially, even to the IPO point. So we're moving in the direction that we are we're a smart contract company for industry. So we come from the oil and gas industry. So, I've spent, my years in North Africa, the Middle East drilling, and then years in completions. And then, so really that was kind of low hanging fruit. We knew that, oil and gas was pretty antiquated when it came to what they were doing contractually and with data points. And so we were able to go in there and scale pretty good. Now we know that, we've always known that, our technology can be utilized, for any industry. That really falls into the bucket of having to have lots of real-time data in one place. And so when you look at like a utility sector, banking and trading, those are more on your Ethereums and hyperledgers and those kind of blockchain technology. So that's their space. Our space is really industrial. So we asset tracking, KPIs, lots of information, daily reports, bill of ladings, shipping. Those are the areas that take our industrial blockchain and fully, utilize it. So we're scaling into every single industry, moving through transportation. We already have some contracts for shipping. So, and then, on the water side, I really like I like looking at permits, putting permits onto the blockchain under smart contracts and KPIs. The certification of water quality for me, we're now, 5 or 6 years ago, people were like, well, if I give you this water, you'll treat it and give it back to me. The commingling of waters was just not something that resonated with people very well. But now you're seeing these big, full scale recycling, facilities that are coming in, they're commingling waters and then they're shooting it back to different operators. So, and then, New Mexico's, got legislation that's really, really pushing for people to recycle. Ogallala's been hit, other aquifers have been hit. So let's, lessen our need on the freshwater side and let's start, utilizing, this industrial well and repurposing it for, industrial or maybe even agriculture if we can get there. So I really, really like the water space. I think our technology really fits there really well from a governmental entity, from a governmental standpoint, from, a customer operator standpoint, and then just from a regular ESG standpoint to the market and to the population that, we're low, limiting our footprint. We're not putting more strain on these aquifers and look how much water's been, recycled. And now, you have trust and faith in that data that, at any given moment, somebody can go on there and see it. It's not some handwritten generated report. So those are just my thoughts.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, again, Fred, thank you for what's been a most informative look at the future, perhaps, of water management in New Mexico and nationwide. Certainly seems like a technology that could be readily adapted. Who wants to be the first? Who wants to be the early adapter? We will see. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to hearing about future developments in this technology.
Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Zach,
Thanks,
thank
Fred.
Fred, thanks a lot.
If we could have the secretary's report.